Okay, so this is a talk about how I'm still not using GUIs in 2019. I might speed up a bit because originally this was a half an hour talk. So just throw things at me if I go over 10 minutes. So this talk is inspired in a blog post I've written in February, which got quite popular. I went to a few podcasts to talk about it, got lots of emails, and it was a really nice experience. And I wanted to do a talk about this since then because I wanted to answer two of the most common questions I get when I say that I don't tend to use GUIs in 2019. There are why and how. And as you asked me earlier, there's also, oh my god, why? It's also reasonably common. So, I think I should start with this one. Because, it might sound weird for someone to come up here and say like, oh, you should develop software in this way that people used to do, I don't know, in the 80s, 70s, from 95, so I don't know, really don't know. Especially when we got so many amazing GUIs out there, right? Amazing buttons to click on, dragging the mouse around, amazing. And this might, can you imagine like when people came up with books and then someone in Edge was like, oh yeah, I actually quite like my papyrus. It's very nice, isn't it? And now you might think, oh, no one would ever say that, right? Who says this kind of things? People do say things like that. So now it's Hacker News o'clock, the time of the talk where I read the amazing comments that I got on that post on Hacker News. I'm going to start with one of my favorites, in which someone quotes a passage of that post, which says, using the terminal at least makes you proficient with the lowest common denominator of tools. And then they go on to ask a very deep philosophical question. Why even use a computer then? Aren't rocks and sticks an even lower common denominator? Makes sense, right? Papyrus argument. There's also this one. This is in StarCraft. Very few developers are limited by their RPM throughput through the UI. And then there's this other person, which has a very Hacker Newsy comment, saying, even your terminal emulator is a GUI app itself. Don't say you're not using GUI apps unless you boot your command line interface directly. I know, right? Clicking item when I boot my Mac is like hard. Can't do it. But I have a Vim tattoo, so I have some credibility, right? So hot take alert, right? Now it's actually time to start the talk, because I just have 2 minutes. I need to say this. GUIs, they're bloatware. So I used to have 25 minutes to explain and make this a more nuanced argument. Here I just have 5. I'll do my best. And that's not because GUIs, people design GUIs to be bloatware. It's because designing GUIs by nature makes them become bloatware. Because when you're developing a GUI, you need to think of all the things that people are going to do in advance, and you need to make those features built-in into what you're developing. So you need to think too much, you need to make too many assumptions, which makes GUIs end up becoming bloatware. Because also they're very hard to integrate with other software, so you have to make too much assumptions. They become too big, and therefore they become bloated. It's like old school Microsoft programs, right? So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft programs, they have intimate, one might say promiscuous, knowledge of each other's internals. And in Unix, one tries to design programs to operate not with each other, but with programs as yet unthought of. And that's why when you use CLIs, they are not bloated, because you're only concerned with doing one thing and doing it well, because you have universal interface to make them communicate. So you have text streams. And what you should do is you should write programs to handle text streams, because those are universal interfaces. So you don't make many assumptions, and therefore CLIs are small. You are more concerned about writing programs that do one thing and that do it well, because they can integrate with other programs due to those universal interfaces. And you're also more concerned about writing programs that work together instead of writing programs that do everything. So CLIs are good, because CLIs means we have less software, which is the best thing you can have, right? Less software means less time fixing things, less time debugging things, and less time thinking about them, right? Less software is great. And in fact, there's only one thing better than less software. And the only thing better than less software is having no software at all. Right? Sorry, I know that's our job, okay? I'm sorry. So why I don't like GUIs? So I think GUIs are limiting because in the same way that the creators need to think of everything that you're going to need to do in advance, you end up becoming limited by what they thought you were going to do. So basically, if they didn't think of one of your needs in advance, you probably can't do it, or you're going to have a very hard time doing it. They're also not scalable. When you do things multiple times in the GUI, you don't become necessarily a lot faster in it or a lot better in it, or you don't discover usually better ways of doing it. But when you use CLIs, there's always something that you can change to make it more efficient. You can find another program to combine with that. You can have a workflow that's more adaptable and that suits your needs and that scales better with your skills and how much time you spend doing things. They're also hard to integrate. Saving files, opening them in another program, all that kind of stuff. It's just very annoying because they cannot communicate with other programs. And they're also hard to automate because if you're writing a script, guess what? If you're using CLI. And they're also not portable. If you need to do that in a CI environment or if you're SSH into a machine, if you're like, I don't know, if your life depends on it, you will probably have to wait for something to download, open it, all that kind of stuff. But there's things that GUIs are good for. You should use GUIs, but you should use GUIs when you need GUIs. I don't think anyone here thought about using Photoshop as a CLI today. Okay, good, not. Don't do it. That's not what I'm advocating for, okay? So GUIs are good for things like discoverability, like non-repetitive tasks, like dealing with multimedia. And those things, like for example, using Photoshop makes sense because the visual abstractions match what you're trying to do, right? So discoverability, is that really important for us? Are we really trying to discover new features as we do things? We usually approach tasks with a goal in mind and we know what we're going to do. So actually clicking around, discovering things, or playing around with parameters is not really something we do a lot, is it? Non-repetitive tasks. Well, now you might think, well, I don't do repetitive tasks, but your tasks might not be repetitive in their intent, but they're repetitive in their nature, right? So everyone needs to move files around, needs to transform some data, needs to convert things, needs to, I don't know, run some regular expressions, that kind of stuff. So there are repetitive tasks that you can become quicker and that you can scale much better if you use CLIs. Also, multimedia, okay, this is questionable. Many people deal with like videos or front-end development. I don't use a text-based browser. I do use, Chrome. It's fine. So yeah, GUIs are bloatware, but they're bloatware for what we do, not for every single task, right? So now I explained it. So using CLIs is actually about speaking the same language as your machine, having more shared abstractions, more precise vocabulary, and making it things less magic so that you know what's happening behind the scenes, right? So that's my problem with IDEs. When you click buttons and they do too much, and when something fails, it's very hard to figure out what's happening. So when you use CLIs, you're more in touch with what's actually happening, you know what's behind the hood, and you're speaking the same language, you know why things are the way they are, and what vocabulary is used. So okay, I don't know how much time I have.
Keep going.
Okay, I'll just keep going. Yeah. So how do I do it? Right. So these are the tools I use. So Zosh, Tmax, and NeoVim. This is like the most basic starter pack you can have. So starting with Zosh. So what is Zosh? Zosh is just a shell. So it's just another program. So in the same way that Bash is a program, or Sage is a program, or Fish is a program, is also a thing, an animal. But like they're just ways of interacting with an operating system services. So basically, it's very important to differentiate these things. What's a terminal, what's a terminal emulator, and what's a shell. So a terminal is the actual terminal, the physical thing, the thing that people, how can you use said, oh, you're not doing this. And then there's the terminal emulator, which emulates the real thing. That's why it's called an emulator. In my case, I use iTerm. I heard the Max native terminal is quite good these days. So by all means, have a go. Also, and Zosh is the shell. So it's the program that is run within the terminal emulator, which provides you access to the operating system services. So it looks something like this. So there's a keyboard providing input to your emulator, which passes that to a TTY driver to the programs. So I'm not going to go into streams now because I just have 10 minutes. But why do I do it? Well, you can try using /bin/sh and you can just feel the difference. So I quite like Zosh's auto-completion features. It's very easy to navigate around, very customizable, lots of plugins. It's very, very nice. So for managing my Zosh configuration, my plugins and stuff, I tend to use all my Zosh. So again, I'm going to go too deep into this, but basically just makes it very easy to get started and to get your configuration working. Plenty of stuff on GitHub. Just go there, you find lots of good info. Tmax, which is a terminal multiplexer, which is a fancy name for something that divides your terminal into multiple panes. So it looks kind of like this. So it gives you the nice bottom bar in the end, allows you to persist sessions and organize your workflow more consistently. So Tmax works something like this. So you have a server which stores your sessions, which means you can attach and detach whenever you want. So when I go home, I have a session for the things I'm working at home. I have a session for the things I'm working at the office. Or if I'm writing a blog post, sometimes I'll detach and create a new session just for that and have an environment and stuff. Inside a session, you can have multiple panes or tabs. And inside pane or tab, you can have a window, which is the actual thingy. I'm not going to go into all these plugins, don't worry. All these slides are going to be online. And now my favorite part, Vim. Oh, nice. Yay. Where are my Vim users? Yay. Yeah, nice, cool. Okay, so this is my text editor of choice. It's harder because it's different, and it's better because it's different. So yes, the learning curve is a bit steep, but it's definitely worth it. I might be biased to say it, but it's just so nice. I actually use NeoVim more these days. So NeoVim is just a continuation extension of Vim. It has better support for asynchronous tasks and allows you to write scripting in Lua. If you tried to write VimL before, you know how important this is. And now why it matters. So people say like, oh, okay, but actually most of the time I'm not writing code. And that's absolutely correct. But this is actually not really about writing code faster. It's about writing thoughts faster so you don't have to keep them like in your head and keep juggling. And it's about reducing drudgery, so you don't have to do many repetitive tasks. Because when you're writing code, when you have this idea and you want to put it down, you want to put it down as fast as possible so you don't have to keep thinking about it. And as fast as, like, if you can put it down faster, you actually make the code resemble your thoughts much better. And it's also about ergonomics, right? No one likes to keep moving their hands to the mouse, and it's just so much more comfortable to have every single thing that you want to do in the reach of your fingers. So how to become pro, I'm not going to go deep into this because there's many steps, but Vim Tutor is really good. So if you have a few spare minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, just open Vim Tutor. It's an interactive tutorial which allows you to add a text file using Vim commands. Do things the Vim way, learn the vanilla commands. Don't try to use too many plugins, otherwise you're going to be trapped into them, or you might just end up with a bloated Vim RC. Always ask yourself if there's a better way to do this, because in Vim, 99% of the cases, there is.
Hold on just a minute.
Debatable. Okay. Okay. So next thing, resist the urge to quit, which is not very hard because no one knows how to do it anyway. But I'm going to teach you today. So how do you quit? Very easy. Just queue. And when things don't work, you just, because sometimes you're going to do this, and Vim's going to say like, oh, you cannot quit. Then you have to do choices. You can quit, and you can you can scream with it like this, and then it's going to quit, or you can just stick to it and learn, because you don't know how to quit. Vim plugins that I use. So these are the ones I consider to be essential. So Nerd.tree is quite good for visualizing file structures, and also it's very easy to actually have a visual representation of how your files are nested. Because sometimes if you just have text, that might be a bit weird to see, and that's one of the places where visual representations come in handy. FZF, which is just a finder. So FZF is just for you to allow you to find files by their names very quickly. A match, so if you write markup, this makes things very easy and very quick. AO, which is not beer, it's a synchronous linter engine. So it basically allows you to have different linting mechanisms running for different languages, so you don't have to install 1 zillion plugins. So if you do like JavaScript, you can just have ESLint running through AO or pre-tier whenever you save files and things like that. NeoMake, which is what allows you to run tasks asynchronously, and the biggest advantage of NeoVim, and also language specific plugins. So, just if you're using Go, just use plugins for Go. If you use JavaScript, just plugins for JavaScript, TypeScript, and so on. There's also one that I forgot to put here, which is You Complete Me. So basically, it's a plugin which runs like language servers, which you can ask for suggestions and stuff for auto completion, and for getting information about types and that kind of stuff. It's quite nice. So general tips and references. Be careful with your .files, make them pretty, put them on GitHub, share them with other people, because many times you discover better ways of doing things. Try to do more using less. Don't use lots of plugins. Usually the programs that you already know have options or different ways for you to do things, so just try to do more using less. Learn one trick at a time. So these things take quite a lot of time to get used to. You're not gonna, go out here today and learn everything. Automate everything that you can. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. Do nothing scripts, which are a quite nice idea. So basically just create a script which gives you instructions, printed instructions for what you need to do, and then you can automate them bits by bits. And you also don't forget any steps on repetitive tasks. And learn the fundamentals, Linux, just learn your way around command line, and that's basically it. So not gonna go through all of these because I don't think I have time. Yeah, sorry. So my .files are here. My posts are here. This blog is very good. Thank you.